Hi, I'm Brooks Rayford, president of the North Carolina Technology Association, or NCTech. And from time to time, we feature short discussion segments like this with leaders from various sectors. Today, I'm very pleased to have with us Chris Andersey and Alfonso Albuquerque, who are the managing partners of Astral Insights, which positions itself as a decision intelligence firm. It's a term we're starting to hear more prominently, so we thought it would be interesting to learn a bit more about what that really means. So Chris and Alfonso, thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you, Brooks. Happy to be here.
Great to have you. So we'll dive right in. Forbes has said that although the term decision intelligence has been around for a while, it really gained traction when Gartner named it a top trend for 2022. So explain the distinction between traditional business intelligence, data analytics, which are terms we've all heard for a long time now, and decision intelligence.
Sure. And Brooks, I think going back to the history briefly is helpful here. So business intelligence and traditional analytics really came forth as ways to leverage data and information to make better decisions. So when we look at the whole family of decision intelligence now, data analytics, business intelligence, we're really looking at ways of making better decisions using data. And so when we look at decision intelligence, what we're really trying to do is understand why events happen in a business, not just what has happened, and then understand if I take a particular set of actions, what is likely to happen as a result in the future. And traditional BI typically tells you what happened. It'll give you great trends into what's happened, whether it be strategically, financially, operationally, but it often doesn't go further to say, okay, now why are these trends happening? What are those underlying driving factors? And then it doesn't necessarily tell us what's likely to happen in the future. And the final component to decision intelligence is not just the technology, but it's understanding how people in an organization collaborate to make decisions together. What are the questions that they're asking of the data to actually understand these problems and actually come to a better decision, make better action at the end of the day. So for us, we think of it as two-part. There's the technology, which is understanding how to actually convert data into useful information. And then there's the human side of things of, well, which information do we actually need to see and why do we need it?
Let me pick up on that with sort of a part two then to the question, because you hit on something there, and that is, it's one thing to have a lot of data and to know what you want to get out of it. And so asking the right questions, as you said, is sort of key here. But what about cases where you don't really know what you should be asking? There might be information or insights from the data that you wouldn't have thought to explore. How can this process help surface those types of things?
Sure. And, I think that's a really common question. And often it's true that even businesses that are sophisticated enough to know a large degree of those questions, they may be missing some, or there are some hidden insights that maybe they wouldn't think to ask. So that really is a great question. And it really comes down to this idea and a philosophy that we really hold close to ourselves, is this idea of rapid prototyping, of continuous improvement, of iteration. And typically what this looks like in practice is we'll focus on a very narrow, very high impact pain point, whether that be perhaps sales is dropping in a specific region or due to a specific sales team, something very specific that we can actually take a data set, or a company can take a data set and really begin what they call mining that data for useful information. And typically they might have one or two questions top of mind, maybe which sales team is underperforming, which particular rep is accounting for the lion's share of my sales, right? But then by actually mining this data, we can understand not how to answer just those questions, but typically the results we get are going to spur additional questions and additional questions. And then that experience really allows the business to then begin doing that across other functional areas and really making it part of their day-to-day decision-making of asking those correct questions.
Yeah. And just to echo a little bit of what Chris was saying there, companies today, they can take some sort of sample data set, and there are tools out there today. They don't need to be decision intelligence tools. There are tools out there today where you can ingest this data and then instantly just run correlations and really get to kind of those hidden insights very, very quickly. So not necessarily do you need kind of a data scientist going in there, looking through everything, analyzing all of everything that's in that data set, but Today we can just ingest some of that information into a system and get some correlations that, will spit out some sort of meaningful insight.
Yeah, Chris, you mentioned a little bit about how a company or organization might use this process. And you gave an example of trying to zero in on why or how a certain sales team or region is underperforming or overperforming and how to mimic that elsewhere. Can you give an example? Are there clients you've worked with, without naming them, where you can talk a little bit about how a company decided to utilize this approach and sort of what happened as a result?
Sure. So I think a good pertinent example is one of our transportation logistics clients. And really, this story is echoed across several of them. And, that is an industry that we found ourselves falling into and really seeing a lot of the same types of issues and top of mind concerns. And for this particular company, they're focused on maritime shipping as well as rail within the domestic United States. And they were really facing issues around having to increase their prices. And of course, doing that in a tactful way so that they understand which clients can we raise our prices a little bit more easily towards, which ones are a little bit more inelastic and perhaps we might actually risk losing an account by raising prices. So naturally, this is a subject where there's a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot of functional areas in the business involved. It's not just sales, it's not just marketing, it's not just operations involved in a decision like this. And you see all of the uncertainty, the rising competition, and really just this inflationary environment with the supply chain constrictions we're seeing, where many, many companies in this industry are really faced with this issue of, we know we need to raise prices to be able to combat some of that inflation, but we need to understand how to do it. And so I go back to that idea of what happened, why did it happen, what if something happens? And really they use that approach, first the what, which is really traditional business intelligence, using dashboards, using graphs, to understand which segments of their client base were making up a larger percentage of revenue or a smaller percentage of revenue, and then segmenting them among further dimensions. So we might look at which clients have more revenue than others, which are coastal versus inland, which are in one industry versus another industry. And through doing that analysis, they were able to find two distinct groups, mainly divided by revenue, where the pricing was a bit more, we'll say, elastic among those larger companies, meaning that they were more willing to pay a higher price, while some of those smaller companies could not afford to have all of that inflation passed into their pricing. And so that gave them a good background to understand, okay, I know who I'm going to raise prices with first, but then you don't necessarily know how much. And so that's where predictive analytics comes in and machine learning comes into the table of, we need to compile all of this data that we currently have and begin looking at, if I raise prices by X percent, by Y percent among these different segments, what is likely to happen? Using past information, using external data from competitors, all together to understand what's the most likely outcome if I take this set of actions. And through all of that, they were able to raise prices much more tactfully than they might do otherwise if they were just looking at pure human intuition or relying on pure historical charts. And this is really an example where decision intelligence really ties everything together, where you have people working together with these processes of knowing how to use this technology combined with data and analytics tools to really make better decisions in a very agile, proactive way.
So Alfonso, on that note, I was going to ask you, can a company embark on implementing decision intelligence approach using their existing data sets and platforms, or are new or additional tools needed?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And definitely, when companies are first looking into decision intelligence, one of the first questions they're most likely going to ask to themselves. And I would say it's kind of a little bit of both, because even in the beginning, when we're talking about BI and analytics, we view those as kind of a foundation that's required for decision intelligence. And decision intelligence is just really not only just a tool out there that you can bring in and start using across your organization. It's more of really a philosophy and a way that you view certain business questions and how you ask questions of the data. So that's not to say that you don't need these decision intelligence platforms to kind of get to that next level. But even with traditional BI, just dashboards and the way that you design some of these different tools, the way that you build that insights experience is how you get to really leveraging ideas and philosophies like decision intelligence.
Yeah, and just a quick note on there, part of what we see a lot of is companies, they want the predictive analytics, they want the advanced forecasting, they want all these advanced features. But when we really look at it, they're not fully utilizing even their Excel spreadsheets, their dashboards, their charts, they're more basic tools. And so really step one is let's get the most value out of what we already have. Let's socialize the benefits across the company, and let's understand how to use these tools better to work collaboratively together. And then, only then, do we start introducing more advanced features.
That's just a side note. I was moderating a panel years ago of CFOs of major corporations, and one of them commented that the audience would be shocked to learn just how much of all that they do is basically in Excel, and they all nodded in agreement.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, listen, I want to switch gears a little bit. Thank you, first of all, for explaining this concept and why it's different, what makes it even more and better than some of the traditional approaches. We'll talk about your firm and the two of you. You recently rebranded your firm as Astral Insights. So describe the evolution that caused you to do that, and what is it that you do for your clients in this arena?
Sure. So prior to 2 weeks ago, we were the Astral Consulting Group, founded early 2020. And we were really focused on a similar overarching goal, which we still do today, which is basically turning data into intelligent action, turning data into meaningful insights. Now, before we were labeled as a data analytics consulting company and got some solid traction doing that. And there was really two reasons we started to rebrand towards this idea of decision intelligence. So one was just seeing this market need emerging among our existing clients. We saw an issue with the fact that they had a lot of dashboards, they had a lot of charts, they had a lot of spreadsheets, but a lot of executives and leaders, even down to the manager level, were not using these dashboards at all. And a huge problem was they were just created based on a data set without that underlying question in mind. So these tools were not built to answer specific questions, to do specific things. They were really built with the data first instead of with the business first. And that creates this idea of information overload, where if I'm an executive, if I'm a manager, I have maybe 5 to 10 different platforms, different tools I need to look at to be able to get insights from data. And we see that that really degrades the ability to socialize the benefits across the company. It gets stakeholders to not believe in this idea of analytics because they see something that they can't use. And so we saw this whole host of challenges where we saw technology working, but we didn't necessarily see it working well with the individual and the people. So to Alfonso's point about it being a philosophy, we realized we really do need to tie all of this under a new philosophy and not just work with data, work with analytics. It's really a lot more about how do we now enable the human to make better decisions at the end of the day. Yeah. So there was that need. And then also we just saw the explosion of the trend across many different companies. We've seen some great partners of ours actually develop some great technologies that we're going to be able to bring to our clients. We've seen, of course, Gartner and Forrester giving it some limelight, and really just realized that, this is a space we wanted to be in, an area we think there's a lot of room for growth, and an area we think there's a tremendous need as there's more data being created every single year. I think it doubles every couple of years, and it's just really an incredible opportunity to help clients eventually across the world make better decisions.
Alfonso?
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, it's crazy the amount of companies that we talk to that have gone through these different analytics, business intelligence projects. It's not a secret anymore that analytics and BI, they can bring a return, but there's so many companies that have these dashboards, they're siloed dashboards, they're kind of all over the place. And although they've made this investment, they find that there are still reactive companies. They're always just reacting to certain events, certain situations, rather than being able to take that next step, which with decision intelligence, being a little bit more proactive and kind of staying ahead of the curve and just gaining competitive advantage that way. So that is a big thing as well.
Gotcha. Well, it's. I was going to ask you, what do your clients ask you for? And you sort of answered that. This is here's what we're trying to achieve. And so your role is to help marry up data they have with tools they may or may not have to provide them with insights and information that they're not quite getting, or the nuances they're not quite getting. So that's great. And as you note, most of the decision makers probably are not as technologically or data savvy. So having the ability to visualize the data or present it in a way that is digestible and actionable is sort of where you come into the picture.
Exactly.
And that's a huge point, Brooks, and something we've realized too is that in the past, people saw data and analytical tools as something just reserved for an analyst. It's something you'd send off to an analyst and you get an answer back. And now we're really working to help redefine that among many other companies in our space, is this idea of self-service and universal access to data where we see a future where these tools are used just as ubiquitously as you'd have Excel spreadsheets across the business.
Well, great. Listen, this has been a great discussion about the subject and about your firm. But before we go here, I've got to let you talk a little bit about your great personal and business story. You went to college together in Pennsylvania. You joined different large firms out of school. Then you teamed up to form this consultancy, which you launched in the Triangle in North Carolina after considering a number of other places around the country. So tell us about your decision to team up and how you landed here and how you feel about that decision now.
Yeah. So we both started at Lehigh University, and the way we met, we were both in the same program there, which was this program called IBE, which is Integrated Business and Engineering. And in that program, we really got a lot of exposure to entrepreneurial thinking and workshops, and had a particular professor there, Pat Costa, so shout out to him, who really gave us this idea of the problem being in the market, being in the customer's mind, not being in our head. So this idea of really going to the marketplace, finding a problem, and then working to solve that problem. And so I think, at least speaking for myself, that planted somewhat of a seed. And I always thought, Alfonso will tell the story. He's obviously had some experience starting some businesses of his own in the past as well. And really got the kind of the creative juices flowing of saying, okay, this is something we probably want to do eventually. And for myself personally, I've always been a musician and used to be huge into making video content and all of these different creative endeavors, and never really saw myself lasting super long at a Big Four or one of these more typical routes. And so after Lehigh, when we ended up at, of course, those Big Four firms, as many people do in New York City, we kind of saw that there was a little bit more to be desired. It was great work and especially great people. I think that the best part was certainly being in that environment with some really exceptional and talented leaders and professionals. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, and especially once COVID hit, that's when we just had more time on our hands to kind of sit and think and evaluate, is this really what we want to be doing? Where are we really going? And that's kind of what led us to jump off, take the leap. And we kind of looked at each other and said, hey, we're not married. We don't have a house. We don't have a mortgage. We don't have children at the time. So, if there's ever a time to really take that leap, we figured, why not now?
Yeah. COVID was really, really a blessing in disguise for us. And just a really big switch in the way that at least I was viewing things, was in the corporate world. And then this new opportunity presented itself, and it was such an exciting opportunity. And even just back then thinking about, and before we hadn't even made the decision in North Carolina, moving here, but just even thinking about, maybe we could go to Texas, California. But then of course, North Carolina did come across. We were looking at a couple locations here. We were looking at Durham. We were looking at Raleigh. And of course, Austin, Texas was also in the list. But it seemed like Austin, Texas had already gone through kind of its huge boom. The secret was already kind of out. And then when just visiting the Triangle, just seeing all the great companies moving here, all the amazing talent that's being homegrown around the area, it kind of just made, it was really a no-brainer. And by being here, we hope to be part of that growth and grow with the community.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it helped too. We were bootstrapping the company and we were living in New York City, or actually Hoboken, and, $1,500 a month here will get you a little more than a shoebox, or at least it would about a year ago. Obviously things are going a little bit crazy here, but we're absolutely all for the growth and just, looking forward to be part of the growth of this community.
Well, that's great to hear. It is a great story. It's always nice when someone that you've known and come to trust early in your adult life ends up becoming a great business partner, and you can build something together like that where you have full control over the direction that you go and address trends like this in real time and be of service to the clients that you serve. So I want to thank you both for doing this today. We're very glad that you're here in North Carolina and that you're active members of NC Tech. I think it was one of the earlier things you did when you got to the area.
Yep.
I was joining, so that was great. and we're excited to watch and support your growth. Our viewers can find you all at astralinsights.ai. And I want to thank everyone for watching. We'll see you next time.